Hey everybody, it has been a while since we did one of these building in public episodes. We actually have a bunch of recordings of brainstorm sessions and product planning meetings that we will likely release later. I'll be honest, I bit off a little more than I could chew on editing. Today I wanted to give a few updates on where we're at. The intention around doing this is really building systems of integrity to keep us in alignment with our purpose as a company. For myself and my brother, as we steward our company, steward Joe's purpose and mission moving forward, we're doing the things that will keep us accountable and in our integrity around the bigger purpose for Joe, which is our vision to transform the coffee industry through principles of regenerative commerce. And that can be something that can demonstrate a new model of business. If we let go of kind of conventional wisdom that's based on war metaphors and we think about, hey, what if the most healthy ways of building systems is by building in alignment with self-evident principles that we see. And as we're in this cusp, like this really interesting moment in time where, quantum physics in particular, our materialist view of the world and how science has conditioned our collective minds and ways of relating to each other and to nature is evolving. It's being disrupted and transformed through quantum physics. Right now, it's a huge deal. I don't know if people think about this, but the fact that we're practically applying quantum physics to quantum computing chips, Microsoft and Google are now manufacturing chips. The evidence of how much more impactful and powerful harnessing and applying principles, quantum principles, is like exponentially improving the kind of computing power that we have and what we're able to do. And the way that I tend to look at it is, science is a increasingly refined and calibrated but very small view of the larger truth and reality that we exist in. As that is evolving into quantum, and that we're at a point where quantum is being now practically applied to commercial applications, to me, that's self-evident of a transformation that needs to take shape in business. The next 40 years are going to be defined by quantum, by AI, through a reevaluation, disruption, and a rebuilding of every system that humanity relies on. It's evident in the turmoil that we see in our geopolitical environment. Ultimately, this previous generation of commerce and government has been built on principles of power and exploitation. A system that is not built on regenerative models, by definition, has an end date. There has to be balance, homeostasis. There has to be circular, equitable outcomes for there not to be an exhaustion of the resources and imbalance in the distribution of those resources in a manner in which will break the system ultimately. And so I think I'll say for another time just how we arrived at those conclusions. What is fascinating is we came to those conclusions before ever hearing about regenerative commerce as a principle. In a previous episode, we talked about how the passing of our dad was probably the hardest moment in our life because the business was about to go under. We were personally, our finances were completely exhausted. We'd been running into a brick wall with Joe and not getting the results that we had hoped for. But the gift that came out of that experience is that it changed our perspective of how we relate to life and our purpose with Joe Once we started shifting that and bringing it into alignment with what we saw from a more spiritual perspective, the business really turned around. And we started seeing much more healthy dynamics. We had breakthroughs that intellectually we couldn't have got to if we didn't really connect through our heart and have some head-heart coherence. As we've leaned into that, things have accelerated. And so now I'm pleased to share that we are in the later stages of a due diligence for a Series A, which is a big deal for a startup like ours who had almost gone under, truly, multiple times, through the commitment of our team, through some luck, through a new perspective. We found the courage to, rather than shrink and contract, execute a smaller vision that we felt we could have more confidence in. By making our scope smaller, we did the opposite, and instead poured our energy and resources into pursuing our highest ambition unapologetically and getting the courage even to express it and to start taking actions on it. And so now we are in due diligence with what we feel is a very aligned investor. They have long-term horizons in how they think about their investments. They focus exclusively on businesses like ours, a vertical SaaS play. I think we're very unique. We have marketplaces built in that we want to build out for the entire value chain from farm to cup. This part of our experience has been really fascinating, and I thought it was important to get on here and actually get something out just in service of the principles that we talked about before. It was really important that we start sharing this in a really authentic way, that we lean in on keeping the production value really raw, that we don't try to be the buttoned up, high polish idea of what people think about as a startup. I think our intention is our brand needs to be authenticity, integrity, and being rooted in our purpose. And that really challenges a lot of the fears and insecurities of my brother and I that we are really working intentionally to heal and move away from, and to fully embody and have the business reflect and be in alignment with the personal transformations that we feel are super important. We want to build systemically into our company, into our daily lives, into our families, and integrate all of those things together for the deepest sense of purpose possible. Really value success not based on the valuation of our company, how big of rounds we can raise through institutional investments, or how much money we make. I think what we see great satisfaction in is how much can we transform other people's lives for the better? How much can we create systems that make it possible and more accessible for as many people as possible to have the security and the ability to create, express, and connect is really the three big things. And, I could go in on another episode. I think I can really dive into just the strategy on that. I think there's coffee, and we look at the impact that it has and what's possible in bringing small businesses together, not just in terms of coffee shops and roasters and suppliers in the coffee ecosystem that you think of as connected to the retail experience when we think of coffee shops and coffee houses, but the businesses that create the entire value chain all the way up to the farmer, and really including the farmer. So all of that is really just hopefully some important context. Some big updates with it that we have is been working with a couple folks. One brand or company that I would like to, or organization that I'm really interested in, and I'd love to put anybody on that's interested in thinking through how to address inequities in the coffee ecosystem, is the work that One Big Island in Space, or OBIS, is doing. It's connected to Big B Coffee, which is a franchise in the Midwest. Bob and Michelle Fish are really leading this effort to begin to elevate this grave injustice in the coffee industry, which is that the farmers, the producers that are carefully handling and doing the hardest work, spending hundreds of hours in cultivating coffee in the global south, are through a bunch of pretty disheartening dynamics being exploited to the extent they are now producing coffee or selling coffee for less than it costs to produce. In many of these cases, they don't have any other options. It blew my mind to find out that 60% of the coffee consumed in the US comes from farms of 12 acres or less. These are hardworking, scrappy, brilliant entrepreneurs finding a way to make it work, aspiring to create a better life for their families, children, and communities. They are rubbing two nickels together and finding ways to turn it into a life. And well, these Bob Fish, so we met with Bob Fish and a couple times now, and he really opened our eyes to the realities here. So I won't get into it too much, but I would really recommend anybody that resonates with to check out their organization. It's one big island in space. They take people on trips to the farms, and they're really working to illuminate the industry that the price of coffee that we should be thinking about is the gate price, which is how much the farmers actually get paid. There's a whole supply chain and the pricing that we see that typically we look at and we compare to the cost of production or what the farmers get paid. It's actually a few steps down from the farmers where the markups happen. The price per pound that farmers are getting right now is about $1.46. I think it's about $2.50 is the cost of actually producing that coffee. And that price point, what coffee has been at the gate since 1972 has been $1.46, not adjusted for inflation. So you can imagine what kind of impact that has. I think for me, I've used the mental model of how different it is for wineries and how much of the reverence of wine to the consumer is not about how that wine was made necessarily, but the origin or where it was grown is really the thing to be revered, and how it was cultivated and the care that it was cultivated in. And so I think that that's a little bit of a perception shift that needs to happen in the coffee industry. It's something that's really exciting. This is a huge part of our long-term vision for Joe, is finding ways to really leverage the consolidated buying power of the consumers on our platform, of the coffee shops, and then building more efficient systems that grow the pie for coffee shops, roasters, small business suppliers that can sell through our platform, bringing that all the way up to create more efficient and prosperous systems for every single step in that coffee ecosystem, to bring transparency and efficiencies. And it's not something we can do on our own. We're looking to build a coalition type approach. We don't know everything. We're learning. We are raising some money, and it's a meaningful round. And we're just getting started on the other side of proving out after a couple of years to evolve from a mobile ordering only app to a full operating system. We did it with a lean team. We're profitable, and we're picking up momentum in a big way. Now we're looking for the right people to join the mission and the right partners to be a part of it. We're looking for strategists and experts in regenerative commerce. We're looking for people with deep industry knowledge and relationships in the coffee ecosystem across the entire supply chain to get involved. We're looking for people with early stage startup experience that don't want to run back what their previous experiences, that aren't motivated by ego, that aren't motivated by huge paychecks, but are instead motivated by the idea of transforming a system and being a part of something like that, and pursuing our highest ambition to make the biggest possible impact on the folks that need relief the most. If you're one of those people, if you know people like that, please send them our way. We are building out kind of our model We are forming partnerships. I'm having really interesting conversations with folks that can throw their weight around in the coffee industry. When we first started pursuing this vision, it felt like the conversations that we're having already would be 3 or 4 years down the road. While we're trying to be as pragmatic as possible and we're being very systematic in our approach and we're taking measured bets at every stage, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in this journey is that sometimes impossible things can become a reality really quickly when the right people and the right intentions are in alignment. I think we're in a moment right now where, especially politically, we're definitely being affected with some of the tariffs, really just on like uncertainty and disruptions in terms of supply chain. But I do think that it's important that the way that we relate to it, the way that I personally relate to it, takes practice and intention. It's not really about naming the people as enemies or the culprit, because ultimately I'm a true believer that people are inherently good and that it is how we're conditioned through fear and how that's addressed that causes the issues. Fear turns into greed and lack and an addiction to growth as a justified ends in itself rather than a means to an end that serves a higher purpose and is human-centered. The thing that I'm most excited about is every step that we take and every proof point that we have in building systems that bring people together, that cultivate trust, that introduce new mental models and paradigms around how we can succeed economically, how we can succeed in terms of food, shelter, community. That shifts people. When we first started, people thought we were crazy that we were going to put a bunch of coffee shops who people saw as competitors on a single app. We had pushback early on, but we just knew that if you create a superior customer experience, it's going to grow the pie for everyone, and now we have all the data to prove it. The things that seemed impossible a few years ago are the reality today and picking up momentum. And as we see it, and as we're evaluating the whole coffee ecosystem and understanding, okay, well, how can we remove efficiencies from the system? How can we invest where investment is needed to create more sustainable, more transparent systems? Those are the things that will stabilize coffee prices. Those are going to be the things that will make the coffee that you consume, you can feel confident that it was sourced ethically, that those communities that are taking the care to harvest that coffee have a great standard of living, and that we're bringing balance and homeostasis to a system so that we can all spiral upward together. We can create systems where everybody has access. We should be thinking through these systems of mutual prosperity. Our success should be defined by the extent to which access to being able to create, express, and connect are possible for every single human being. And I think we can make that possible in the coffee ecosystem. If we can do that, what is really cool is you think about the kind of scale and impact that coffee has on our everyday lives. More people use the Starbucks app to pay than use Apple Pay. Starbucks is the 10th largest bank in the world. There's actually 5 times as many independent coffee shops in the US as there are Starbucks. The collective scale and potential of small business owners coming together around systems of shared prosperity is massive. And it's not a idealistic thing. It's not a, pipe dream. It is a truth, a self-evident truth that isn't an ethical conversation. It's an alignment with self-evident patterns of what we see in nature, which is in conditions of entropy and chaos. Life exists through these self-evident principles that are circular in nature, that are rooted in the reality that we are all connected. It is a falsehood that there can be groups that experience freedom and wealth unconstrained and people that are suffering, and that system can sustain, and that the people in the have group are not affected and suffering in some way. You can't be truly free while another group or being is truly suffering in that way. This is a moment in time for humanity where, in whatever small way, we can be in alignment with those beliefs and that vision. At least we're doing our part. The big insight that we had when we started this turn and evolution from Joe was that we would rather fail trying to do something that we felt deeply rooted in purpose and deeply aligned with than to succeed and betray those parts of ourselves and do things to the status quo and the convention. Us being in this due diligence process right now is a really big deal because we set a really high standard of, hey, we will go this alone and not take any more investment if that means that we get to pursue this in an unmitigated, unconstrained way. And for us to take investment, it would mean that the investors were fully aligned with our vision, aspiration, and belief in us as founders. And so we feel like we have that. I'm not going to share who the investor is just yet until the round officially closes. Our intention is to use this as a moment, and we seek to bring in values-aligned partners that are trying to create the same kind of transformation to benefit from our commitment and creativity and hard work and the success we have in using technology to tap and nourish the collective potential of independent businesses, starting with coffee. I have a couple notes. As part of this, that big thing is that I want to make sure that we're not just talking about the positive side of these journeys, but also normalizing being vulnerable. I think you can't be authentic if you're only doing that. One of the big things, I think back to, I did a episode for, what was it? Was it Seattle Startups? Back in the day, and I talked about the journey of I had generalized anxiety disorder during my time working at Microsoft and even at Zillow. It went away and then it came back. We did a podcast. It was me talking about that and how getting out of a more corporate environment to a startup space created a lot of relief. Then there was more crisis that came later with Joe. The mental health aspect has always been a signal to me of am I on track? Am I relating to my surroundings in a healthy way that I now know is more aligned with my sense of purpose and my beliefs? I personally feel like I relate to it as why I'm here. And being present has been mindfulness has been a really big aspect of that in terms of getting into a healthier place, as well as trust and relating to fear in a different way. Being truly present, not trying to over-intellectualize things has been a real gift and a relief and has elevated my performance as a leader and an entrepreneur. It's a dance as an entrepreneur because it is very challenging to be present, but you need to plan for the future and you need to look at a P&L and you need to monitor cash burn and do these things. We've been conditioned around certain ways of doing that. Going through a due diligence process brings you out of presence and a state of flow in the day-to-day business, the conversations you have with your team, the time you spend fine-tuning and mastering the craft of creating a really great culture and systems and thinking about who the next hires are going to be and product features. And that's the part of building a company that I really enjoy. The part that I really don't enjoy is needing to try to imagine what things are going to look like in 6 months, 12 months, 36 months, 60 months. And it can be a good forcing function for some reasons. I think that really crystallizing vision, language, all of that, it can be really good. It can be counterproductive in the sense of when you feel like doing those things, you start getting this sunk cost feeling. The more time you spend on these processes, the more important it is that you get the outcome you prefer. It has been a really interesting it's added some emotional volatility and up and down. We have to spend a lot more time pulling numbers and reports and putting new things together and customer calls and a very intense, extended due diligence process. Although the investors are very supportive and aligned, I have learned it's less about the folks you're talking to and more about giving them what they need to get consensus with their entire team. Because an investment in you is there's opportunity cost to that. It's not investing in something else. It's not spending time or putting those dollars into something else. And folks we're working with only make a small handful of investments every year, but they make bigger bets. And then they follow on in a much bigger way and have longer term horizons on the return on those investments. So it's worth it. And it's been an interesting added wrinkle to my own growth as a founder, and I think my brothers too, where the journey as an entrepreneur, when you realize that your ability to hold uncomfortable emotions, to really examine them and heal things as they come up, allows you to expand more and you become more competent and stable. Your vision becomes much more clear. You become much more resilient. But you got to embrace the discomfort of those things, being forced out of presence and then needing to build the muscle. I would say that at this phase, something that is improving really quickly for my brother and I is the ability to see the company from 30,000 feet, then to context switch and jump in to the most granular part of what a email template should look like for a certain step in a customer support workflow, all the way back up again. And then in the middle, see it from a systems perspective and then see it from a people perspective, a unit economics perspective. With a model like ours, we have to make sure that we have clarity in terms of what we're expressing. And that's different when we talk to a coffee shop owner or a roaster or an accountant or a barista or a consumer. It's very nuanced. Every string is connected to another part of the business in our product and our messaging. So we have to be highly coherent at every phase, not just across stakeholders, but different levels. Going through a due diligence process really tests that and has allowed us to crystallize it in ways I didn't expect. It has not been without challenges, but the group we're working with is really great. I'm excited about the future on that. We feel really good about the alignment that we have, like I mentioned. When I go through my LinkedIn feed and I see the stories that other startup founders or VCs, like what those look like, it's always so buttoned up and it's so clean and it's so, I don't know. I think it doesn't resonate with me. I think it's like a get rich quick kind of dream that is being sold that I think is kind of part of the problem. So I think it's important to show a contrasting view, something different. Thank you for letting me share that. I have a bunch more that I'd love to share, but we will be releasing more of these in the near future. Please let me know what you think about this. If you have questions around the startup journey, regenerative commerce, I want to talk to you. We're reaching out to folks. I'm having conversations with folks that I'd love to either bring in as consultants or as strategist roles to help us really build this thing out. This is a call to folks that are aligned with this vision. Thank you very much.